Go ahead.
Okay. So anyway, welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. I really have been wanting to have this conversation for a long, long time. And then while that time has been going on, material has just been coming in more and more. So it kind of grew. But Jean is going to pick it apart for us and really kind of hone in on some things that I think we're really unaware of, and just give you some tools that will help you navigate. We're in a place in our lives now where we talk about detoxing all the time, and it might kind of go in one ear and out the other. And you might not even know what actual detoxing is because there are different ways. And it also depends on what you're trying to detox. I know that Jean's going to get into that a little bit. I don't think that's for tonight's discussion. I think we're going to probably lay out what our job ahead of us is if we really want to live a healthier lifestyle. But I am so glad that you're here. We are recording it because we feel like it's information that you'll probably want to cover again. And maybe this is just the beginning of a journey that you're going to go down and dig deeper because something here really hits home to you. So we hope that's what it is. It's going to be sort of just that lead that you need into something that's going to really help you in the long run. So with that, Jean, our registered dietitian, put this presentation together. It looks phenomenal. And please feel free to ask questions. We do have material to get through, but this is so that you can understand it. And that's what we really want you to do. So Jean, when you're ready.
All right. Well, thank you, Connie, so much. And thank you all of you for taking time out of your evening to join us tonight. I really think this is going to be very eye-opening for you. Like Connie was saying in the beginning, there's probably going to be some emotional reactions. That's very normal, very common. I've gone through it as I've learned about this stuff, as well as even while I was writing this presentation, I told Connie, like, nothing has really kind of set me off as much as this because as you'll see, there's a lot that we need to know. So this is certainly not to make you afraid or anything, but I think it's really important that you know. But the other piece of this is after you have all the information, you're going to have what you need to be able to combat this in the best way that you can. So today I'm going to lay out more. I'm going to focus more on, we're going to go through several of the toxins. So we have 10 to cover. I'm going to cover 7 of them tonight. And then next week we will cover the rest of them. And then we'll get a lot more into the, what can I do kind of stuff. Okay. So, without further ado, I will go ahead and get started so we can try to stick to our timeline here. But you should all be able to see the PowerPoint. I'm going to start the slideshow. So this will be part 1 of toxins and your health. And of course, part 2 will be next week. So our objectives are, number 1, to discover the top 10 most common toxins that are in our environment. You're going to understand the potential health impacts of these toxins. So these are the main 2 objectives for today. And then we will review the body's detoxification processes, because most of you have heard me talk about this before, but I would like to refresh your memories, plus give you a little bit of context in terms of these kind of specific chemicals. You're going to empower yourself by learning how to protect your body against these toxins. We're going to learn how to identify these substances in products and in our homes, and we will explore some safer alternatives. So again, this is definitely designed to get you thinking and to get you to kind of raise your awareness, but also to help you empower yourself to take control of it. Okay, so just as an overview, toxins are abundant in our environment. Toxin is kind of this non-specific term, right? Anything that's potentially harmful to our body. So there are 84,000
I can't get any sound. I don't know what I'm doing.
Right
now.
Annette, make sure.
Oh, no, I
okay.
don't.
Your mic, we can hear you, Mike. Uh-oh.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I don't know if she can hear us. Let me.
You want me to keep going, or you want me to wait a sec? Sorry, guys. Sound check.
I'm trying to get Sue in, so just a second.
Okay.
Oh, there's a picture of me.
Hi, Bill.
Yeah. But then Jean's on the one that's showing. That way everyone else is not being shown.
Yeah, they don't have their
Are
cameras.
you
Other
even
people, they don't
joined?
have their cameras on. And Annette, you do not need to have your camera on if you don't want to. That's totally up to you.
Water's truck all the time.
Annette, have you got sound?
Well, might have had the volume on.
Here she's calling me. Hey!
Hey, we can hear you.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, your mic is on.
Oh, the mic is we can't see. We can't hear you.
It's Jean talking.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Hope I didn't say nothing bad.
Yeah, I see you, but I can't hear you.
It has to be something on your computer.
Yeah, Connie, they need to check their speakers and make sure their speakers are turned on.
Yeah. Okay, so the mic is off now, Annette. So maybe you can figure out how to get your speakers to work.
It's working. Okay, Bill says it's working.
Okay, all right.
Okay, great. Michelle, how about you? She said she couldn't hear anything either.
Do we need to mute ourselves?
Unless you want to ask a question.
Okay, so we should.
I would recommend muting, and then at the end, if you have questions, we'll do all the questions at the same time.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right.
All right, cool. Okay. Let's start back from where I am. Okay. Okay.
Did you see
so
Sue? Sue is in there yet?
is she here? Hold on, let me participant. No, I don't see Sue.
All right.
I don't even see her in the waiting room or anything.
Yeah, just keep going. Let me see what I.
All right, sorry guys. Okay, so again, about 84,000 toxic chemicals and counting. New ones are being discovered all the time, and they're everywhere. They're in our water, they're in the air, our food, our homes, our offices, the stores we shop in. So essentially, they're not avoidable. And some of these toxins can have very devastating environmental and personal health consequences. So it's not just about us, but it's about the health of the environment as well, which of course, without the environment, without the planet, we also do not exist. So we kind of need to care about both. Various diseases that are linked to some of these toxins, I'll break that down a little bit for you here in a minute. But the problem is that these are often overlooked for multiple reasons. Number one, because many of these cannot be detected by standard medical testing. Okay, so you're not going to be able to go to your primary care physician and get a test for lead or get a test for PCBs. I mean, it's a thing, it exists, you could certainly test for it, but it's not something that your physician would normally do. Another issue is that healthcare practitioners are not educated on the topic. Surprise, surprise. And therefore they don't consider any of this stuff in the diagnostic process unless it's extremely obvious. If you have what's pretty obvious signs of lead poisoning, for example. But a lot of this other stuff is subtle, and the symptoms are very wide ranging, and they can be attributed to other things. So more than likely, they're going to look at those things, the more obvious medical causes, and not some of these underlying sort of reasons. Another issue is that the effects are cumulative over time. So it often takes years and years and years to develop any kind of symptoms or any disease process. And by then, the damage has kind of been done. So again, unfortunately, they're unavoidable, but that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. And you will learn lots and lots of things about that. Okay, so I do want to give kind of a general overview about plastics because a lot of these chemicals that we're going to discuss today are found in plastics. Plastics are currently the Earth's biggest contributors to pollution and human-induced climate change. So what I mean by that is that, there's climate change that is part of a natural process that the Earth sort of naturally does, and then there are human interventions that are contributing to it. So this is human-induced climate change. The biggest producers in the world are the United States and China by far. And up to about 13 million metric tons are dumped into the ocean each year. So even if you don't know what a metric ton is, you know what a ton is. It's a lot. Okay. And so part of the problem is that plastics are designed not to decay. That's why they are used as containers, food packages, product packages, because they have a very long shelf life. They'll take years and years to break down. Most plastic is also petroleum based. And a big problem is that plastics have hormone disrupting effects. We're going to really kind of deep dive into this, but it's not just affecting our hormones, but it's also affecting that of wildlife on both land and in the ocean. So a lot of the issues that are being seen in humans are also showing up in animals. Now, microplastics, which are kind of this hot topic right now, we hear a lot about microplastics, but these are basically little tiny particles that result from when plastic is breaking down. Okay, very recently, it has been discovered that there is microplastic in the average human bloodstream, so that's comforting. Effects include DNA damage, oxidative stress, interference with hormones, and various diseases. And then another issue, just to kind of add a little insult to injury, is that these microplastics often also contain heavy metals and potentially other harmful chemicals. So it's kind of a loaded gun here. I wanted to just share this graphic because I found this very interesting with bottled water. So there was a big worldwide study that looked at various countries. You can see here that several countries were included. There was Mexico, Brazil, the United States, China, and they looked at different brands of water to see what concentration of these microplastics were contained. So for every liter of water, okay, which is like 32 ounces, it's a quart, about the same as a quart, 325 average number of particles in each liter of water. Okay. You can see they only tested 2 brands from the United States, which was the Nestle Pure Life and then Aquafina, which come from different sources. Nestle Pure Life is a spring water, whereas Aquafina is a purified municipal water. So it's basically city water, mostly from Richmond. Yeah.
Can you let Sue in? I think there's two people trying to get in.
Hang on one second.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to add something. I have no place to back it up except for I came across it, so I don't know how true it is. But that one of these waters, I think it's either Dasani or Aquafina, would not freeze when it was put in the freezer. I
believe it was Dasani. I think I remember that experiment.
Yeah. And then isn't Pellegrino the green bottle?
Yeah, San Pellegrino is is a green, and it's actually a glass bottle. Well, of course, it may be sold in plastic as well, but traditionally it's in a glass bottle.
Yeah, but it had some metals in it, I think, as well.
So that's fun. Yeah. So this is just microplastic. We're not even talking about other contaminants. So really important to be aware of. You're definitely better off to buy a really good water filter, which is something we'll discuss next time. So really try not to buy water bottles in plastic, especially the Pure Life brand. Some of these we don't sell here, like this Bisleri. That's not a brand we have here, but just kind of be mindful of these brands.
Okay, just make sure everybody's in, if you would.
Okay, so there's 3 people that are showing not in the meeting, and Annette appears to be one of them, but there's no option for me to let them in or anything. I don't know why it's saying that. I don't know what that means.
She may have closed and then trying on their phone.
Oh, okay. Maybe. But and then now Michelle.
Now she's unverified.
Yeah, those 4 are all saying they're not in the meeting. So I don't know. It looks like people are dropping somehow.
Okay.
I'm not sure what's happening.
All right. I'll try to work on that.
Okay. It's always our first presentation in a while that we always have problems. I don't know why. Just how it goes. Okay. So the first guy we're going to talk about is BPA, because this is one that you see a lot talked about. We're also going to talk about the replacements for BPA. So the full name of it is bisphenol A. There's a lot of chemistry in here, but I've simplified it down to where there's not a lot of crazy things to pronounce. Luckily, abbreviations exist, so that's BPA is what that stands for. BPA was actually invented as a menopause therapy, so it was a hormone replacement. So that should kind of start telling you, that should start setting the stage here for the rest of this information. In the 1930s, it was used for this, and then in the 1950s, they discovered that it was really useful as a plasticizer, which makes plastic flexible and pliable. It is still used in that capacity. It hasn't been used as menopause therapy in a long time. So what happens with BPA is that the exposure occurs when that BPA migrates from plastic into the food or the water or whatever's contained within. It's also particularly activated by heat. So you may have heard not to leave your plastic water bottles in your car. This is why. Okay, because the heat, it's hot inside your car, the sun's beating in it, you're going to have a much higher release of BPA than if the car were cold. Okay, so definitely, if you are drinking out of plastic water bottles, make sure you're not leaving them out in the sun or in a hot car. So the big issue with BPA, and this is why it worked as menopause therapy, is that it binds to estrogen receptors and it leads to inappropriate estrogen production, or confuse the body into thinking it's actually estrogen. So it's acting like estrogen. It's stimulating the body to produce estrogen when it doesn't need to. Okay, so hormonal balance is very important. You need a balance of your various androgen hormones like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, etc. Okay, so it's causing your body to make too much, essentially. So this is why it worked as menopause therapy, because it helped stimulate that estrogen production. It also interferes with the body's binding of hormones to receptors. So all hormones require a receptor to function. All right. So it interferes with that binding to where the hormones can't do their job, but they can also exaggerate hormone production in addition to the estrogen. So other hormones can also be overproduced. So this is classified as a xenoestrogen. So you may remember in previous, those of you who have attended my past presentations, I've used this word xenoestrogen. You've heard xenobiotic. So xeno means foreign. Excuse me. Xeno means foreign. All right. So it's a foreign estrogen, it's a foreign substance. You may also see this called an endocrine disrupting chemical, or an EDC. All right. So this is its classification. BPA has been found in all human body tissues and fluids. It can cross the placenta, and therefore it can impact the fetus. Now, there have been replacements in recent years due to the discovery of the toxicity of BPA. So some of the others you'll see are BPS, BPAF, and BPF. Now, these are touted as safer. You may notice, if you buy a can, for example, and the can brags that it's BPA free, that doesn't mean it doesn't have these other things in it. Unfortunately, as it turns out, they also have pretty much the same toxicity and the same hormonal effects, so they're not any better. So you can see where BPA is found. I already sort of mentioned the plastic bottles and food cans, baby bottles. Again, they have removed BPA from a lot of baby bottle brands, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have those other substitutes. Cash register receipts. This is one that most people don't realize and don't even think about. But every time you touch that cash register receipt, you are absorbing that BPA through your skin. So I typically refuse a receipt. I mean, nowadays it's really not that necessary because we get bank statements, so unless you have to have a receipt, like to submit for reimbursement to your employer or something, always choose a digital receipt if you can, or just tell them you don't want it and let them touch it and throw it away. Okay. Polycarbonate plastic. So this is what kitchen appliances are made from. So like if your food processor or your blender has a plastic pitcher, that's what that is. Plastic travel cups and reusable water bottles, dental sealants, and also optical lenses. Okay, so sometimes glasses will also have some BPA in it. So hold on, people keep getting kicked out, so I have to. Okay, there we go.
It's really potent though, guys. You know, I think before we talked about the
I can hear you now.
Invisalign. Okay, good. Good.
Yeah, so Invisalign is another example, yeah, of some of these plastic chemicals that are in there. And Connie, you actually kind of negatively reacted to them, right?
Oh yeah, talk about hormone disruption. Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
I saw it because I ended up having to stop them, and then things got back to normal. But
Yeah, so
those receipts, it doesn't take but seconds for it to get into your skin.
right. So yeah, so again, really don't take a receipt unless you have to. So BPA is definitely linked to hormonal cancers, particularly the reproductive type cancers like ovarian and breast, decreased fertility and libido. It has been shown to lower testosterone level in males, which makes sense, right? Talking about the estrogen and that inappropriate secretion of estrogen. So the higher your estrogen, the lower your testosterone. So it automatically will push those levels down. We've seen early puberty in children. We've seen insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. We've seen alterations in normal immunity, particularly allergies. People who get hay fever or tend to have very severe seasonal allergies, that's a potential cause. Heart disease, we got weight gain, obesity, and some metabolic disorders. There's some evidence of developmental and behavioral issues in kids. ADHD is included in this. And then inflammatory bowel disease, which is autoimmune bowel disease. So like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So in the United States, 78% of people tested positive for BPS, which remember is one of these so-called safe replacements. And then about 55% of people had BPF in their urine. All right. Now, they did test some of these other replacements to, this was in vitro, which means it was done in Petri dishes, so not done on humans. This was just cells. But the BPAF was shown to have even higher estrogen impacts on the breast cancer cells than BPA. So again, not safer, clearly. The other issue is that if you are on chemotherapy or any type of drug for treating breast cancer, BPA will disrupt the activity of those drugs. So it actually reduces their effectiveness. So not only can it increase your risk of getting breast cancer, but it decreases the chances that your treatment is going to work. So it's a double hit. All right. Fetal exposure to BPA can impact development of the genitalia. It can also impact the DNA programming of ovaries and testes. So when the DNA that dictates what the ovaries and testes will do, how they will function, how they will develop, it can alter that. Uterine development is also impacted. So in female fetuses, it can cause the uterus to not grow correctly. And children under 5 have the highest BPA concentrations. And some of this most likely does come from exposure in utero. The Endocrine Society did a study on children and actually looked at the relationship between these bisphenols and body mass index. So as it turns out, children with higher BPA and BPS also had higher body mass indexes. So they were more likely to be overweight. And then a couple of these were also related to increased abdominal obesity. So they're likely to be fatter around their middle, which in adulthood is a high risk factor for heart disease and various other things.
Is that also a symptom of the liver being taxed? That it can't
what do you mean, the abdominal obesity?
Yes, but for the children, especially.
It could be. You don't typically see the liver. You don't physically tend to see the liver until it's really, really enlarged. So most likely not. Maybe later in life, but yeah, usually no. It's going to be more related to the adipose tissue. But that's not to say. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, again, we'll review detoxification, but let's not forget that the liver has this big job of trying to filter all this stuff out.
Right.
So it definitely works harder. Okay, so number 2 is phthalates. So this looks like a really hard word to pronounce, but as with Latin-based things, so you don't pronounce the pH, it's just phthalate. These are also used as plastic softeners, but their main use is fragrance enhancers. Okay, so if you see the word parfum as an ingredient on literally anything, we're talking baby wipes, cleaning products, perfumes, anything with a scent to it, basically, is going to be phthalate. Okay, so anything with a scent to it, unless the scent is listed as an essential oil. And the more responsible companies will do that. They will specifically tell you that they're essential oils. So if that is not stated or listed, I would assume that it is a phthalate based fragrance. Okay, these are also classified as EDCs, endocrine disrupting compounds, and just endocrine disrupting chemicals. These are also found essentially everywhere in the environment. They're in everything. Because they leach easily into food and water, and they're very highly absorbable by the skin. So remember, again, these are fragrance things. A lot of these we are putting on our bodies, right? We're spraying perfume on ourselves. We're using scented lotions and shampoo and moisturizer and Febreze and laundry detergent. I mean, so you're probably exposing yourself to this multiple times a day just through your products that you're using. Okay, so this one has a lot. If there's one that you have a huge amount of control over, this is it. If I had to pick one out of the 10 that you really can eliminate from your life, it's phthalates. Okay. Women are at higher risk of toxicity due to simply we use more of this type of stuff. We use more perfume. We use more of these scented products. But in the United States, we consume about 340 million pounds of phthalates. So really goes to show how much we're buying that has the stuff in it. So again, anything scented, all right? So pretty much all perfumes, your Blessed Chanel and all your very expensive designer perfumes are inevitably going to have phthalates. Household cleaners, detergents, nail polish, anything made from vinyl, so like shower curtains, blinds, flooring, electrical wiring, and it's also used some in upholstery as a flame retardant. And we'll talk more about flame retardants because they're a separate category. You can see kind of a laundry list of issues ranging from behavioral disorders to birth defects, thyroid dysfunction, fertility issues. You're really going to start seeing some patterns here, guys. Okay. I mean, the lists are almost identical for most of these with some exceptions, but phthalates are also particularly bad for asthma. So if you have a child with asthma or you suffer from asthma and you can't really figure out, you think you're doing everything you can do, look at the products in your house, look at the things that you're spraying and using, and see, if that could be causing it. So 98% of Americans tested had circulating phthalate byproducts. So our body breaks them down to some extent. So that means it was circulating in the bloodstream. Phthalates have what are called epigenetic effects. So this means that they can alter your DNA and change how your genes are expressed. So they can turn genes on and off and up and down. I don't know if we know specifically which ones. I didn't get into all that, but knowing that something can alter your DNA in a negative fashion, that's really enough for me. The current research does suggest a strong correlation between phthalate use and reproductive disorders. So correlation means that they have a direct relationship. So in other words, the more phthalates you use, the higher you have a chance of developing some type of reproductive disorder. Just like with the BPA, being exposed in utero can increase the risk of various issues in adulthood, like low sperm quality, hormonal imbalance that supports pregnancy. There was a very interesting study in Israel where they were looking at urine of pregnant women, and they found that phthalates were correlated with emotional and social difficulties in boys, not girls. Not sure why. Again, it may have to do with the estrogenic impact. I don't know, but for some reason it was more prevalent in boys. And then another study of 1,000 women, and this was America, but they looked at all races. So they looked at Asian American, African American, Caucasian. They looked at all the races. Higher urine phthalate concentration significantly increased the breast cancer risk, and that was in all of the races. So, which is interesting because typically African-American women have a higher breast cancer risk in general, but this exposure to phthalate would kind of levels the playing field, so to speak. So yeah, so regardless of that, it was related. So this is just a little sort of chart to show you the trickle down effect of phthalate exposure and sort of the different things it can impact. I know there's a lot of crazy big words here. So I kind of put it on the right to sort of show you the basics of what this means. But essentially the phthalate exposure can impact puberty. So we're talking about physical and sexual development in this first part. And then in the second tier, we have spermatogenesis, oogenesis, which is basically where your body is producing sperm and eggs. All right. And the follicles that are needed to produce them. So this is the HPG axis, which is the hypothalamic, pituitary, and gonad axis. So essentially reproduction. All right. And then a little bit further down the line, we have these changes to cell signaling and cell growth and things that regulate cell growth and reproduction. And this is where cancer develops. Okay. So you can see it impacts things on 3 very, very significant levels. All right. The third one is organophosphate pesticides, which we're going to just call OPs because it's a lot easier to say. These are widely used worldwide on food crops, lawns, golf courses, parks, pretty much anywhere there's grass, large amounts of grass. Seven dust is a pretty common one. Ortho home defense, which is a you like spray it around your house to keep bugs away. And then bio advanced 3-in-1, which is similar. We use about 1 billion pounds of pesticides in the United States, 8 of which are legal in the state of Virginia. Another kind of red flag here is that they were used as nerve gas in wars. So, do with that what you will. They are significantly neurotoxic even at low doses. Okay, so children, again, are particularly impacted by this because their brains are developing, their nervous systems are developing, and they affect both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, which means your automatic nervous system and then your voluntary one. So the things that you do without thinking, like breathing, but also your voluntary movements, like, punching out or something. I don't know, kicking, which is what this makes me want to do. Migrant farm workers have the highest exposure, not surprisingly, right? Because they're the ones who are typically spraying all these crops. They are, of course, then at the highest risk of long-term health impacts. But there was a study that looked at just this specific OP called chloropyrifos, and 93% of Americans have byproducts of that in their urine. So even if you're not using this stuff in your house, I don't touch any of this stuff. I use organic only. I'd rather have bugs, than spray Ortho Home Defense around. So, if I doubt that 93% of America is living in this way. So, it goes to say that you're probably exposed to it regardless. So conventionally grown produce is going to be a common place to find these. Definitely commodity crops like cotton, soybeans, corn, and wheat. Orchards are typically sprayed because that's a good way to cover a lot of area. And then grapevines. So this is part of why I'm kind of big on organic wine, for example, because anything that's sprayed on those grapes will also likely transfer into the wine. So to me, organic wine is worth paying a little bit more for. Flea and tick medicine, okay, because it is used to kill pests, which include those that bother your pets. I do not put this stuff on my animals. That's controversial for some people, but it's to me just unnecessary exposure when she really doesn't have problems with these in the first place. Home and garden treatments, as I mentioned, lice treatment shampoo, drinking water, farm-raised seafood, and house dust. So one really interesting thing, you can see again a laundry list of issues here that they're linked to, but there was a study done that showed that people who had regular exposure to these OPs had a 71% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. And Parkinson's is a degenerative neurological disorder. So again, it's pretty obvious here that these things are definitely neurotoxins, and 71% is a pretty significant risk. So yeah. Also gut dysbiosis has been linked to this. again, you're seeing kind of the same things repeating here: behavioral issues, infertility, weight gain, obesity, endocrine disruption. I mean, they're across the board. It's pretty bad news. So you can see how that all is there. Okay, so these are, I thought this would be a useful graphic for you guys to have so that when you're shopping for produce, you can kind of see which things you need to prioritize. I do not personally believe you need to buy everything organic. It's unnecessary. Some things have very, very low pesticide residues. So it's just not necessary, and you're spending more money for no reason. So this is a little guideline that you can use to determine what you need to buy organic. So the items on the Dirty Dozen list are the ones you should be buying organic. Okay. And this list is updated every year. So sometimes it changes. A lot of these are repeat offenders. They kind of stay on the list. But there are a few that will kind of come and go. So make sure you check the updates every year, but this is current as of this year. And then on the right, we have the clean 15. All right. A good way to look at this too is that if it's a thing you have to peel, you probably don't need to worry about it being organic. So you can see avocados, mangoes, kiwis, melons. You're not eating the outside part, right? So it's a little less of an issue. However, I will say I do still wash my hands after I peel an avocado, for example, or something like that, just to avoid getting it on my hands or into the food, the vegetable that I'm trying to cut up. So
I could just maybe anyway, to wash your food before you cut it, because once you go through that outer thing and get on the knife, you can cross-contaminate the food inside.
yes,
and then
for sure.
One other thing about the organic, we're not talking about organic food right now, so we could go down a whole nother trail, but there is a new preservative, if you want to call it, called Apeel, APEEL, that has come out. And from what I understand, they're allowed to use it on organic and not tell them. And it is fats and the things that we're trying to get away from when we go to eat our fruits and vegetables. So just another thing to get you to wash your stuff the best that you can with clean water.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk about, next week, I'll give you guys kind of more specific instructions on how to wash it, what to use when you wash it, that kind of thing. So yeah. So, but in the meantime, this kind of gets you started so that when you go grocery shopping, you have an idea of. So you may want to screenshot these with your phone so that when you're at the store, you can pull it up as a quick reference. Okay. So flame retardants. So I specified these because I know I mentioned these earlier when we were talking about the BPA, and the phthalates rather, but there are other types of flame retardants that are kind of in a different category. So I wanted to cover those separately. But these, of course, are made and used in the manufacturing of various products. In a lot of cases, they're required to be used. So there's not too much of a way around that. Exposure can occur through inhalation or ingestion, but it's mostly skin contact simply because it's on things that you're touching. Americans have up to 10 times the levels of flame retardants in their blood compared to Europeans because of policy differences. So in Europe, a lot of these things are not required and therefore they're not used. Many of these will bioaccumulate, which means that they build up in the body over time. Children are particularly vulnerable simply because they touch everything. They touch things, they put their hands in their mouth, so they're having a lot more contact with these surfaces. A lot of states have implemented plans to phase these out, which is great because they're felt to be unnecessary and kind of realizing how dangerous they are. Unfortunately, Virginia is not one of those states, but hopefully eventually they will. Many of them continue to persist in the environment, though. So even states who haven't been using this stuff for 10 plus years, they're still kind of hanging around. They take a long time to break down. And just like with the BPA, some of the replacements that they previously thought were safe are also now shown to be toxic. So even the more, quote, safer alternatives are not really so. Again, mainly upholstery type stuff. So like car seats, airplane seats, textiles, so like clothing, carpets, mattresses, like literally things that we're laying on and sitting on and all day, okay? Household appliances, electronics, building materials. So people that are in construction have a lot of exposure to this stuff through like the spray foam, you know, the insulation, that sort of thing. House dust. And then again, kind of the same deal. I would add the mineral bone density. There were a couple of studies on bone mineral density, and people who had exposure frequently to these flame retardants had lower bone mineral density, which is a risk factor for osteoporosis. All right, methyl mercury. So this is another kind of ubiquitous chemical. You'll hear me use that word ubiquitous because that means everywhere. It's all everywhere, all over the place. Air, water, and soil. The most common source of exposure for most people, particularly older people, are dental amalgams. They don't use mercury fillings anymore. So most, you know, younger generations probably don't have any dental amalgams. I mean, I'm 42 and every filling I've ever had was porcelain or whatever. So they haven't done that for a long, long time. But if you have them in your head, you know, from back in the day, that is an option. You can actually have them removed and replaced with the porcelain ones. So just so you know, if you have a lot of metal fillings, would be worth.
Let me just interject really quick.
Yep.
They're replacing it with composites, which is
Okay.
plastic.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's better or not.
So porcelain would be ideal. If you're lucky enough to get gold or porcelain, that would be ideal. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that.
Yeah, and if you get gold, then you look like a baller. So,
yeah.
you know, there's that too. Contaminated seafood, which we'll get into a little bit more in a minute. Vaccines are definitely, there is definitely mercury in those. Various industrial and occupational exposures, certain types of light bulbs, which is why the fluorescent light bulbs are being phased out. They're really only an issue when they're broken, but they do break. It happens. Air pollution, and then marine plants. Marine plants have been found to have mercury in them because of this bioaccumulation. Again, same kind of deal, but with mercury, you'll see also things like headaches, hair loss, speech and language delays in children. So if children have heavy exposure to mercury in utero or as infants, and they have a lot of speech and language delays, that might be something to look at. Mercury is something that can be tested for. So the heavy metals you can test for. That's just, again, not part of a routine exam. You would have to request a mercury level or a lead level or whatever. So I thought this would be a really useful guide because you may have heard about mercury in seafood. And some people avoid seafood entirely because of this, and that's really not necessary because, as you can see, there are quite a lot of low mercury fish out there. So, so use this as a guideline. Tuna is a tricky one because it depends on the type of tuna. There is a brand that you can buy, which is the only brand I buy, and it's called Safe Catch. I get it at Kroger, and they brag that they are the lowest mercury tuna on the market. It costs like $4 a can, but it's worth it. And it's polecat and it's sustainable. So, I mean, it has other benefits too, but definitely be mindful of this. Make good choices with your fish. Buy your salmon wild caught. Okay. You will notice that the farm salmon has high mercury, whereas the wild salmon has low mercury. So as a general rule, make sure all of your fish and seafood that you're buying is wild caught. Okay, it really makes a big difference. Sometimes it's also where the fish comes from, which is why blue crab is on the high list, but regular crab is on the low list. All right, so you can definitely use this for making your choices when you're planning to cook some fish, because fish has a lot of really great health benefits. It has good protein, it's got healthy fats. So certainly not necessarily to avoid it, but just be mindful of this list. Okay, number 6 is lead. So lead is a neurotoxic heavy metal. There is no level of safe exposure. So a lot of these things have kind of a threshold, like a limit that is safe to have up to this amount. Lead has zero. Lead zero is safe. All right. It was in all paint until 1978. It was in all gasoline until 1996. I even remember that. I remember being a kid and my dad explaining this to me. We would go to the gas station, it would say leaded, unleaded, and I'm like, what's the difference? And he would kind of tell me. So I'm even, old enough to remember the gasoline thing. But the EPA estimates that about 20% of lead exposure comes from drinking water. And I'll explain why here shortly. But a study in 2020 looked at water systems and their lead content, and it was determined that about 57% of the population, so over half, were drinking water from these water systems with high lead content. Okay, so up to 5 parts per billion is considered safe, even though I just told you that there's no level of safe exposure, but somehow the government has decided that there is now. So that's kind of sketchy to me. And a lot of people who are older who grew up when lead was allowed in paint, they probably had more exposure because of the paint that was in their home. But it's estimated that about 170 million Americans were exposed to lead in early childhood in some way. Children again are at highest risk because they touch these old toys. Toys were things that were often painted with lead paint. So the kids would pick the toys up, put them in their mouths. Kids, they like to try to eat everything. So they had a high exposure simply from touching and playing with their toys. Low income individuals continue to be at risk. And there wasn't an explanation for this, but I'm guessing it's because of low income housing may not be updated. There may still be this old paint, and that sort of thing. So yeah, so any pre-1978 anything that hasn't been remodeled or renovated has most surely got lead in the paint. Plumbing and water fixtures, which is why it's in so much of the water supply. So it's not that it's in the water necessarily, but it's also leaching out of pipes. PVC. A lot of pipes are PVC now, and there's lead in there. Some candies, imported some candy, usually candies from China, places like that. Some brands of dark chocolate. Sadly, I'm going to talk to you about that in a second because I don't want anybody. If this is one take home, I don't want it to be that you're sad about dark chocolate. So don't worry, never fear. There are options. Pottery and leaded crystal. Vinyl flooring, vinyl blinds, electric cords, house dust. And again, here is our laundry list of problems. Hearing loss is a big one. That's kind of stands out from a lot of these others. So if you're losing your hearing and you don't really have any good reason for that, that might be something to check out. So you guys may have heard about a study that was done not too long ago where Consumer Reports did a sampling of various brands of dark chocolate. And a lot of these were found to have significant amounts of lead and also cadmium, which is another heavy metal. I'm not touching on that because it's not as big of an issue. But I was very sad to find that my favorite brand, which is Hue, was one of the high tester brands. Do I still eat it? Yes, I do. But I have cut back significantly. And the main reason is I just don't like I've tried a lot of these others and I don't like them. So I'm taking the chance, but you can see some very common brands here: Chocolove, Godiva, Lily's, Endangered Species. I mean, these are all brands that we see a lot. So you're better to choose one of the lower lead options if chocolate is something you eat on a regular basis. If you only eat it once in a while, like once a month or here and there, that's not a big deal. Eat the brand that you like. But if you're a regular chocolate eater, then you want to go with one of these other brands. Okay, so this is the last one we're going to talk about for tonight, which is the polychlorinated biphenyls. That's a really long one. So we will call that PCB. All right. This is a family of chemicals ranked by the EPA. Okay, so just to remind everyone who the EPA is, the Environmental Protection Agency, that is their literal job. They have listed this in the top 10% of toxic chemicals. So they are one of the worst of the worst. All right, they have been banned for 50 years in this country, but they are persisting in the environment. They have a very long half-life, which means it takes them a very long time to break down and decompose. and they build up faster than they can be eliminated from the body. So, and part of this is because they accumulate in our fat cells. Fat is meant as a storage. That is the more or less the entire purpose of fat, is to be stored in the body for when it's needed for various things. It does accumulate in our fat cells and in that of wildlife. So again, we're also seeing this in wild animals. It can travel long distances through air and water. So this is another part of its problem, because it can spread anywhere. So even in areas where there was no known PCB contamination, where there was no manufacturing where this should exist, they have found it there. So we know that it can travel. It can show up in places where it really has no business being. Several organizations have qualified it as a probable carcinogen, meaning that it probably causes cancer. So the EPA has made this statement. So has the International Agency on Cancer Research, National Toxicology Program, and then the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. So these are government agencies. Again, it's already been banned, so they've done their job kind of there, but it's still hanging around. So, and then people who have been exposed to PCBs, particularly workers, they do have higher rates of liver cancer and malignant skin cancers like melanomas. So PCBs are typically found in high-fat foods, particularly dairy products, contaminated seafood, which I actually want to jump back to the fish slide, because they also identify those that may have PCBs in them. Okay. Unfortunately, salmon, even wild-caught salmon, seems to have high levels of the PCB. So the farmed versus wild doesn't matter in this case. You know, you're going to get less mercury, but you still have the potential for PCB. So it says may contain PCBs. So again, don't avoid salmon. Don't eat salmon every single day either. But to me, the benefits of eating salmon and all of the nutrients that you get from it kind of outweigh this. You can decide for yourself what you feel, but I just wanted to point that out. So anything with the yellow asterisks may also have PCB. So just wanted to point that out. Get back to where I was. Okay. Contaminated food and water. It's mostly animal products. Again, because of that fat, that tendency to be stored in the fat. So obviously you're going to see it in animal products because they have fat, where vegetables and fruits don't really have fat or have much in general. In a test in 2019, they looked at what foods in the U.S. food supply have the highest levels. So randomly ham lunch meat, I guess, because ham is a relatively fatty meat, chicken, salmon, as I mentioned, tilapia, okay, were the highest. But the good news is they have done this study every 5 years for the past 20 years. And every time they do these tests, the levels are significantly decreasing. So all hope is not lost. It is making its way out of our food supply. It is making its way out of our water supply. It's still there. And even these foods that tested high were really not that high in the grand scheme of things. So it is getting better. So that's very promising. Any electrical products made before 1979. So if you have really old kitchen appliances, like my husband's grandma, before she passed, she had her original refrigerator from like 1960, and the darn thing still worked. I mean, whereas now you have to replace your electronics every 5 years, you know, your appliances every 5-10 years. Hers probably had PCBs in there. So if you have any really old things like that, probably time to upgrade just for this alone. And then house dust. I think we've seen house dust on every single one of these. So we'll come back to that. We'll touch on that next week on that. Again, various issues that it's linked to, various cancers, various fertility issues, IQ problems, developmental issues. So, you know, again, across the board, pretty similar effects of all of these things here. Okay, so like I said, next week we're going to cover the last 3. We got 3 more to do, and then we'll really start getting into the nitty-gritty of what we can do about this, because now you're all probably thoroughly freaking out. Maybe you're a little angry. That's okay. It's expected. Like I said, I went through a lot of emotions doing this too. But the good news is we can take control of it, and we can get it out of our bodies as much as possible, and then avoid future exposures by changing the products that we're using. So I'm going to go through that with you. We're going to identify some products that might be in your home that contain these chemicals. You're certainly, if you want to kind of get a jump start on it, you're free to do that before now. If you want to kind of start looking, for example, just start looking at the ingredients in your personal care products. Look for the fragrance. How many things have parfum in them? Okay. So little stuff that you can kind of start looking at, start thinking about. So we're going to identify them. I'm going to give you some great alternative products. There's also some apps that you can use that will help with this, which makes a lot easier. Of course, we're going to touch on dietary strategies because we need to support our detoxification pathways that are in our body. And then some other kind of non-dietary ways that you can protect yourself. So again, a lot of this is within our control. We can't control what's in the air and the water and the food, but you can control the products that you choose to buy and do yourself a big old favor there. So, all right. So, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. So I will go ahead and take those when you guys are ready. Let me, get back to here. Okay.
Jean, when you talk about optical lenses, are you talking about contacts or implants?
Contacts probably.
Okay.
It was not specified, but my assumption is that yes, it is probably contact lenses, glasses, lenses. I don't know about implants.
Thanks.
Anybody else got a question? I know it's a lot. I know there's a lot of sciencing, a lot of chemistry, but you can really see that regardless of what the substance is, you can see that they all have very pretty similar effects across the board, with reproductive health, with the thyroid, with the brain. Next week, we're going to talk about PFAS, which is another thing that you guys see in the news a lot, these forever chemicals. So we'll really, that's why I saved it for next week, because it's a little bit bigger of a topic. So that's one of the ones that we'll discuss next time. And then again, we'll get into the really good, what can I do about all this type thing, which is really the most important. Knowing is only half the battle, as G.I. Joe says. But the second part is empowerment and taking control of it and doing your part to keep yourself safe and your family and your liver and all that.
Jean, I know you mentioned you talk about like water filters and stuff like that. Will we also talk about water bottles?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you guys, if there are any specific things that you want me to touch on next time, like Kimberly just asked about, please feel free to chime in. And I'm actually got a list going of things I want to make sure are in there. So yeah, we can definitely talk about water bottles. Great idea. Anybody else? Any other ideas for, I've already got plans to talk about air filters, water filters, bottles now, obviously product replacements and substitutions. I have other things too that.
This is Michelle.
Hi.
I have a question. I have well water, and the house is like 20 years old. The softening system that we have uses salt, which is why, because there's always kind of that residue or whatever. So I've never really considered an in-home filter because I didn't know if it would affect that salty taste or anything. And so that kind of leads into the other issue is that I use Nestle's Pure Life bottled water, and I have for years. And the funny thing is that I was just told that I have like no estrogen and no testosterone. So it's kind of the opposite of what you would expect based on what's in the plastic bottles.
Interesting. Well, they're because it's an endocrine disruptor, it is kind of difficult to predict the behavior of what they'll do. So while they've observed it to increase estrogen in people, it could be, I don't know how old you are. I don't know if you're like perimenopausal to where your estrogen levels would already sort of be out of whack. Okay, so that kind of makes sense to me. So you're already in an abnormal quote unquote hormonal state, it's already imbalanced just by default. So I'm thinking that is probably somehow contributing to it dropping your estrogen and your testosterone because your estrogen's already dropping.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So anyway, I guess we can
yes.
address the salt thing next time when you talk about the filters. That was my concern about in-home filters. Like, is it really going to help me if I've got that salt?
Okay. I will look into that to see kind of if there's any literature discussing that per se, or if there's a specific type of filter you should use with this water softener that you already have.
Okay.
So yeah, I will definitely check that out.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Guys,
I
I
have-
also have a water test kit that I have quite a few. If anybody wants little sticks that you can just quickly test your water, it's like 17 different measurements. So if you're interested, I could either tell you the brand or I have some I could share.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Any suggestions for products that any of you guys are already using or that you're already aware of? Definitely feel free to throw out to the group. You can put it in the chat if you like. Or you can just kind of tell Connie and Connie can email everyone, if you have a link to a product that you like, for example, something like that. But yeah, we will really get into products next time. I'll show you lots of examples, comparisons between a good product and a bad product, similar type thing. So you'll really get a good deep dive on that next week.
Jean, like Michelle, I have well water. I have a shallow well, which freaks me out because it's a working farm. And sorry. And we have a filter on our fridge water and all that. But I'm wondering, are there benefits to a deep well? And should I look into that?
Possibly. I have a deep well. I do not drink the water here, however. I was told when we moved here, which was 15 years ago, I probably should have my water tested again, but they suggested we don't drink the water because of metals. That somebody to talk to about that. Well, I don't know. Because I know that the Worrells put in a shallow well not too long ago, and I'm pretty sure they drink their water, but he also thinks Seven Dust is fine. So I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah, so I don't know. I think probably your best bet would be to like Connie said, maybe do that water test. Might get you a good idea. I believe the cooperative extension will also come test your water
Well,
and see what's in there.
we have done that in the past, and that's why it freaks
Okay.
me out. So,
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you may actually want to even have the water tested that comes out of your water filter as well
I was
to
gonna
see how that looks, to see what it's actually getting out.
I mean, it's been a
say,
while. It's probably time to redo it, but
Yeah, I think it doesn't hurt. In fact, that reminds me to do that as well. So get mine
you
rechecked.
might want to start small with the testing, and then we could look at maybe a type of filter after you get your results back before
Mhm.
the well. But when you say deep well, that could mean a few different things. Some people might think that 300 is deep. I don't know how
Mhm.
deep your shallow.
yeah.
Mine is about 575 feet, and our water, and I just had it tested, is actually really good. So we could go on and on about water by itself, but
Yeah.
that is
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, this is good though. This is important. But one thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually research some of these different brands and different types of filters to see how much they actually filter, if they are guaranteed to filter out a lot of these things, because there's a lot of different types. Some of them are more for taste, some of them are just more for like purity, like getting out certain things that affect the taste, like chlorine, for example. So that's something I'll look at as well to kind of see if there are specific filters that are designed for this type of stuff.
You don't want to be drinking fluoride either. And that's not even on our list, but you don't. You want to stay away from fluoride.
Yeah, that's not on. That's in the list of the other 84,000, I guess, toxins. But yeah, and I'm not touching on it in this particular series, but definitely something to do some research on as well. But most municipal water is also chlorinated and fluorinated, and neither of those are things I would want to drink per se. So. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because we're at 10 after 8. Again, I really appreciate you guys being here with us this evening. We will pick this up same time next Wednesday. So, and then yeah, we'll learn lots and lots more, and this information will be a lot more practical and a little less scary. So don't worry. I hope I didn't scare everyone away, but like I said, you'll get lots of empowering information. So don't worry.
Thank you.
So
All right.
you.
You are so welcome. You guys have a great evening, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday.
yeah,
Bye.
and guys, just reach out if you think of anything.
Yes, definitely. I'm happy to address any of the stuff you guys throw out. So yeah, let us know.
Have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.